Ever wonder what Elvis songs are hiding in the shadows? Did the King record covers that even die-hard fans haven't discovered? Number 15, Tomorrow Never Comes. Original by Ernest Tubb. In the twilight of his remarkable career, Elvis Presley dipped into the country catalog of Ernest Tubb for this hidden gem. Recorded during the marathon sessions that would become his final studio album, Moody Blue. Elvis tackled this heartbreak ballad with surprising tenderness. The song wasn't released during his lifetime, eventually surfacing on a compilation album years after his death. Studio musicians present that day recall Elvis requesting multiple takes, determined to capture the precise emotional weight of Tubb's original. What makes this cover particularly fascinating is how Elvis transforms the distinctly twangy country framework into something uniquely his own. His voice, weathered by years of performing and personal struggles, brings a lived-in authenticity to lines about lost love and regret. The arrangement strips away the honky-tonk elements of Tubb's version, replacing them with the subtle orchestration that characterized Elvis's later work. While casual fans fixate on his more flamboyant rock performances, this subdued country cover showcases the musical versatility that made Elvis a genre-crossing phenomenon. The King may have been known for his hip-swiveling performances, but this obscure cover reveals his deep appreciation for traditional country storytelling. Number 14, I'll Be There. Original by Darin. When Elvis entered the studio in early 1969, he was staging what would become known as his comeback. Behind the glittering jumpsuits and Vegas spectacles was a musician eager to prove his relevance in a rapidly changing musical landscape. Among the overlooked treasures from this period is his soulful rendition of Bobby Darin's I'll Be There. Elvis's connection to Darren ran deeper than most fans realize. Both artists successfully navigated the transition from teen idols to more sophisticated performers. Elvis approached the song with unexpected restraint, allowing his voice to caress the melody rather than dominate it. The recording engineer that day noted that Elvis insisted on dimming the studio lights, creating an intimate atmosphere that translated directly into the performance. What's particularly noteworthy about this cover is how Elvis subtly alters the phrasing from Darren's original, injecting gospel-influenced vocal runs that nod to his musical roots. The arrangement builds gradually, with Elvis's voice gaining intensity as the song progresses. By the final chorus, he's unleashing the full power of his instrument, transforming what began as a whisper into something approaching a spiritual experience. Though this track was ultimately relegated to a B-side, collectors consider it one of Elvis's most emotionally authentic performances. The raw vulnerability he displays stands in stark contrast to the carefully crafted public image that defined much of his career. Number 13, Tomorrow is a Long Time. Original by Bob Dylan. In the mid-1960s, while many established artists viewed Bob Dylan with suspicion, Elvis quietly recorded one of the most haunting versions of Dylan's Tomorrow is a Long Time. This acoustic ballad, tucked away on the Spin Out soundtrack album, represents one of Elvis's most understated and emotionally resonant performances. What makes this cover particularly remarkable is how Elvis, often caricatured for his theatrical excesses, strips everything back to the bare essentials. The sparse arrangement, just guitar, light percussion, and voice, creates a hushed intimacy rarely heard in his catalog. Elvis biographer Peter Gromnik notes that the singer had been privately listening to Dylan's work for months before recording this track, connecting with the poetic simplicity of the lyrics. Session musicians present that day recalled Elvis running through the song repeatedly in his dressing room, working out his interpretation away from the usual crowd of handlers and executives. The result is a performance that sounds less like a commercial recording and more like eavesdropping on a private moment. Elvis handles Dylan's introspective lyrics with surprising delicacy, his voice occasionally cracking with emotion. Dylan himself later called it the one Elvis recording I treasure the most, high praise from a joker not known for effusive compliments. This cover demonstrates how Elvis, when freed from commercial expectations, could inhabit a song completely, finding emotional truths beyond the flash and spectacle that often defined his public persona. Number 12. Any Day Now, original by Chup Jackson. In 1969, as Elvis was reclaiming his musical identity after years of formulaic movie soundtracks, he recorded a stunningly soulful version of Any Day Now, a song previously made famous by Chuck Jackson. This recording exemplifies Elvis's often overlooked R&B sensibilities and his ability to inhabit the emotional landscape of blue-eyed soul. The session took place during the legendary American Sound studio recordings in Memphis, where Elvis, surrounded by top-tier session musicians, created some of his most emotionally authentic work. What's particularly fascinating about this cover is how Elvis approaches the material with restrained intensity, allowing the song's narrative of impending heartbreak to build naturally. Producer Chips Moman, known for his no-nonsense approach, pushed Elvis to dig deeper with each take. The result is a performance that balances technical precision with raw emotional power. Elvis's voice glides effortlessly from hushed vulnerability to soaring anguish, demonstrating his remarkable vocal control. The arrangement supports his interpretation perfectly, with swelling strings and gospel-tinged backing vocals that mirror the song's emotional journey. Though eventually released on the critically acclaimed From Elvis in Memphis album, this track is often overshadowed by more well-known cuts from those sessions. Music historian Roger Seaman points to this recording as evidence that Elvis, when properly challenged and engaged, could deliver performances that rivaled the soul giants of the era. The cover shines Elvis not as a rock pioneer or country crooner, but as a masterful interpreter of sophisticated blue-eyed soul. Number 11. Early Morning Rain, original by Gordon Lightfoot. In the summer of 1972, between the glittering spectacle of his concerts and the growing chaos of his personal life, Elvis found a moment of musical clarity with his cover of Gordon Lightfoot's folk classic, Early Morning Rain. This recording, featured on his underappreciated Elvis Now album, reveals a contemplative side of the king rarely glimpsed in his more commercially successful releases. What makes this cover particularly interesting is how Elvis approaches this quintessentially Canadian folk song with such natural affinity. The song's narrative of a stranded traveler watching planes take off while missing home resonated deeply with Elvis, who despite his immense fame often expressed feelings of isolation and displacement. Session guitarist James Burton recalled that Elvis needed minimal direction for this track, seeming to instantly connect with the melancholy at the heart of Lightfoot's composition. Elvis's interpretation strips away some of the more pronounced folk elements of the original, replacing them with a gentle country soul arrangement that creates space for his nuanced vocal performance. His phrasing shows remarkable restraint, allowing the storytelling aspects of the song to take center stage. What's particularly noteworthy is how Elvis handles the line about being 1,000 miles from home, infusing it with a weariness that feels autobiographical. Music journalist Alana Nash suggests this recording offers a rare glimpse of Elvis the artist rather than Elvis the entertainer, showing his ability to convey emotional truth without vocal pyrotechnics. Though rarely mentioned among his classic performances, this thoughtful interpretation demonstrates Elvis's underappreciated skills as an interpretive artist. Number 10. That's Someone You Never Forget. Co-written by Elvis Presley. Few fans realize that Elvis occasionally ventured into songwriting, making this track a unique entry in his catalog. Though not strictly a cover, this song deserves inclusion because of its unusual origin and deeply personal significance to Elvis. Co-written with his bodyguard Red West in 1961, this haunting ballad was reportedly inspired by the death of Elvis's beloved mother, Gladys. The song appears on his 1962 album, Potluck, but was largely overlooked amid the flood of movie soundtracks dominating his releases during this period. What makes this track particularly fascinating is hearing Elvis perform material with such direct connection to his own emotional life. His delivery is measured and introspective, lacking the theatrical flourishes that characterized many of his performances during this era. The arrangement, featuring delicate strings and distant backing vocals, creates an almost dreamlike atmosphere that enhances the song's themes of memory and loss. Biographer Peter Gorilnik notes that Elvis rarely discussed his songwriting contributions, preferring to maintain the image of himself as strictly a performer rather than a creator. This reluctance to claim authorship adds another layer of intrigue to this overlooked gem. During the recording session, engineers noted that Elvis requested unusual privacy, asking most of the usual entourage to leave the studio. The resulting performance has an intimacy rarely heard in his more commercial recordings from this period. While not technically a cover, this rare glimpse into Elvis as Joker reveals the depth of feeling he could bring to material that genuinely moved him, offering a counterpoint to the increasingly formulaic nature of his early 1960s output. Number 9. Stranger, In My Own Hometown. Original by Percy Mayfield. During the legendary 1969 Memphis sessions that revitalized his recording career, Elvis delivered a blistering blue-soaked version of Percy Mayfield's Stranger in My Own Hometown. This gritty performance shanksons an aspect of Elvis's musicality that casual listeners might miss: his deep affinity for raw, unvarnished blues. The track eventually appeared on the Back in Memphis album, but remains overlooked compared to the hits generated from these sessions. What makes this cover particularly compelling is the autobiographical resonance it seems to hold for Elvis, who, despite his local boy-made-good story, had become increasingly detached from his Memphis roots. Studio musicians present at the session recall Elvis becoming unusually animated during the recording, at one point stopping the band to demonstrate precisely the groove he wanted. The resulting track simmers with barely contained frustration, Elvis's voice taking on a rougher edge than usual as he inhabits the character of a man returning to find himself unwelcome in familiar surroundings. Producer Chip's Moman, known for his straightforward approach, later commented that this performance showed what Elvis could accomplish when he fully engaged with material that spoke to him personally. The arrangement builds around a driving blues rhythm, with Elvis occasionally ad-libbing and encouraging the band to push harder. Backing vocalist Donna Jean Godchaux recalled being surprised by the intensity Elvis brought to what was essentially an album cut with no hit potential. This overlooked gem demonstrates Elvis's ability to transcend the polished pop persona many associate with him, and reconnect with the raw, soulful energy that first made him a revolutionary figure in American music. Number 8. U.S. Mail. Original by Reid. In early 1968, as the psychedelic revolution was transforming popular music, Elvis recorded one of his most unusual covers, Jerry Reid's tongue-in-cheek country narrative, U.S. Mail. This quirky choice, released as a single that reached a modest £55 on the charts, reveals Elvis's enduring connection to country music and his underappreciated sense of humor. What makes this cover particularly interesting is that Elvis convinced Reid himself to play guitar on the recording, creating a fascinating musical dialogue between two distinctive artists. The song's playful wordplay, centered around male homonyms, and tough guy posturing, gave Elvis a chance to showcase his offy teller rather than just a vocalist. Producer Felton Jarvis recalled that Elvis immediately connected with the song's swaggering persona, delivering the lyrics with a wink and a nod that perfectly captured their humorous intent. The arrangement keeps Reid's distinctive claw style, guitar picking front and center, with Elvis adapting his usual vocal approach to match the conversational nature of the lyrics. Session musicians remembered the recording as unusually relaxed, with Elvis and Reid clearly enjoying their musical interplay. This performance came during a challenging period in Elvis's career, after his movie soundtrack commercialism, but before his 1968 comeback special, making it a fascinating bridge between eras. Music journalist Colin Escott points to this recording as evidence that Elvis, even during his least inspired professional period, could still make compelling creative choices when the material sparked his interest. While hardly his most famous recording, U.S. Mail, offers a glimpse of an Elvis rarely seen, playful, self-aware, and deeply connected to his country music roots. Number 7. I'll Hold You in My Heart. Original by Eddie Arnold. During the marathon recording session now known as the $1 Million Quartet, where Elvis informally jammed with Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash, he delivered a passionate, off-the-cuff version of Eddie Arnold's country standard, I'll Hold You in My Heart. This impromptu performance, captured on December 4, 1956, at Sun Studios, offers a fascinating glimpse of Elvis returning to his musical roots while already a national sensation. What makes this cover particularly special is its unvarnished quality. With Elvis accompanying himself on piano, his voice carries the raw emotion and country inflections that RCA producers would later work to polish. The informal setting freed Elvis from commercial expectations, allowing him to simply sing a song he loved with genuine feeling. Sun Records founder Sam Phillips, who had initially discovered Elvis but sold his contract to RCA, preserving this authentic musical moment. Elvis approaches the song with reverence for Arnold's original, while infusing it with his distinctive vocal stylings, demonstrating his deep knowledge of country music standards. Music historian Colin Escott notes that this recording captures Elvis singing for the pure joy of it, rather than for commercial considerations. The performance builds in intensity with Elvis's voice growing more impassioned as the song progresses, culminating in emotional peaks that showcase his remarkable dynamic range. Though this recording remained unreleased until years after his death, it provides invaluable insight into Elvis's musical instincts when freed from studio constraints and commercial pressures. This rare, unguarded moment reveals the country foundations that remained central to Elvis's musical identity even as his image became increasingly removed from those roots. Number 6. My Way. Original by Claude Francois. English version by Paul Conca, Frank Sinatra. While many casual fans know Elvis occasionally performed My Way in his 1970s concerts, few have heard his studio version recorded in 1973 during a late-night session at his home studio in Graceland. This lesser-known studio take offers a fascinatingly different interpretation than his live performances, revealing layers of nuance in Elvis's approach to this iconic song. The track wasn't released until after his death, appearing on the posthumous Elvis in Concert album. What makes this cover particularly compelling is how Elvis transforms what had become Sinatra's signature song into something distinctly his own. Rather than attempting to replicate Sinatra's detached, almost triumphant reading, Elvis brings a wounded vulnerability to the lyrics. Producer Felton Jarvis later remarked that Elvis seemed to approach the song not as a victory lap, but as a complicated reflection on choices made and paths not taken. The arrangement strips away much of the bombast associated with the song, starting with just piano before gradually adding subtle orchestration. Elvis's vocal performance builds with remarkable restraint, saving the emotional crescendos for precisely the right moments. Engineer Mike Morin, who captured the recording, recalled Elvis insisting on multiple takes, searching for an elusive emotional quality he wasn't hearing in the playbacks. What's particularly fascinating is how Elvis's interpretation seems to foreshadow his own fate. There's a world weariness in his delivery that adds poignant subtext to lines about facing the final curtain. While casual listeners might dismiss this as simply Elvis covering a standard, closer attention reveals it as a deeply personal artistic statement from a man increasingly aware of his own mortality and legacy. Number 5. A Fool Such as I, original by Hank Snow. Though Elvis's 1959 version of A Fool Such as I reached #2 on the charts, many fans don't realize it was a cover of country pioneer Hank Snow's 1953 recording. This fascinating reinterpretation, recorded during Elvis's Army service while on leave, represents a crucial evolution in his artistic approach. Released during his military absence from the spotlight, this cover helped maintain his commercial presence while floating his growing sophistication as a vocalist. What makes this cover particularly interesting is how Elvis transforms Snow's straightforward country lament into something far more complex emotionally and musically. The arrangement incorporates doo-wop elements and sophisticated backing vocals, creating a pop-country hybrid that perfectly bridged Elvis's rockabilly origins and his more produced 1960s sound. Elvis approaches the vocal with newfound maturity, displaying impressive technical control while maintaining the emotional authenticity that defined his best work. Session musician Hank Garland recalled that Elvis arrived at the session with clear ideas about the arrangement, showing growing confidence in his artistic vision. The recording jinx Elvis's remarkable ability to borrow from multiple musical traditions, country gospel, R&B, and synthesize them into something uniquely his own. Music historian Ernst Jorgensen points to this recording as evidence of Elvis's often underappreciated musical intelligence and his instinctive understanding of how to reimagine material for maximum emotional impact. Though remembered primarily as a hit single, this cover deserves closer examination as a pivotal recording that helped Elvis transition from his wild rock and roll origins to the more versatile performer he would become in the 1960s. The performance demonstrates Elvis's gift for finding fresh emotional truths in familiar material, a talent that would sustain his artistic relevance through multiple career phases. Number 4. I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. Original by Hank Williams. During his landmark 1968 comeback special, Elvis delivered a hauntingly intimate version of Hank Williams's country classic, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. This performance, part of the informal sit-down sessions that provided the special's most memorable moments, offers a fascinating glimpse of Elvis reconnecting with his musical roots after years of increasingly formulaic movie soundtracks. The cover wasn't included in the original broadcast, but emerged later on expanded editions, making it a relatively obscure gem, even among devoted fans. What makes this cover particularly special is the setting, surrounded by his original bandmates, Scotty Moore and DJ Fontana. In a small, informal circle, Elvis approaches this country standard with reverent simplicity and emotional depth. The arrangement strips everything back to basics, just voices and guitars, allowing listeners to experience the remarkable purity of Elvis's voice without studio enhancement or orchestration. Director Steve Binder recalled that Elvis seemed particularly connected to this material, performing with closed eyes and complete emotional investment. Elvis introduces the song with genuine admiration for Williams, calling him probably the greatest writer of country songs in the world, before delivering a performance that honors the original while bringing his own distinctive vocal approach. Guitarist Scotty Moore later commented that this performance reminded him of their earliest days together, before fame in Hollywood had complicated Elvis's artistic expression. What's particularly fascinating is how comfortable Elvis seems inhabiting this stark country material after years of pop detours, suggesting that his musical instincts remained intact despite career distractions. This overlooked performance captures Elvis at his most authentic, reminding listeners of the country and blues foundations that always informed his best work, regardless of how far his career had taken him from those origins. Number 3. Reconsider Baby. Original by Lowell Fulson. During the final session for his 1960 album, Elvis Is Back, recorded immediately after his return from military service, Elvis delivered a blistering version of Lowell Fulson's blues standard, Reconsider Baby. This raw, powerful performance reveals a side of Elvis that casual listeners might miss entirely: his deep affinity for authentic blues expressions. Though included on his comeback album, this track remains overlooked compared to the more commercial singles from the period. What makes this cover particularly remarkable is its unvarnished quality. Recorded in essentially a single take with minimal preparation, it captures Elvis and the band discovering the song together in real time. Saxophonist Boots Randolph delivers a scorching solo that pushes Elvis to match its intensity, resulting in one of his most uninhibited vocal performances. Engineer Bill Porter, who captured the session, later recalled being surprised by Elvis's command of blues phrasing and his willingness to let the band extend the performance beyond the typical constraints of a pop recording. The arrangement stays remarkably faithful to Fulson's original blues structure, with Elvis making no attempt to tan-dye or commercialize the material for pop audiences. His vocal approach draws heavily from African-American blues traditions, trotting his lifelong absorption of black musical expressions that began in his childhood. Music critic Peter Guralnick points to this recording as evidence against those who would dismiss Elvis as merely a pop appropriator, noting the depth of feeling and stylistic authenticity he brings to the performance. This overlooked gem demonstrates that even at the height of his commercial powers, Elvis remained connected to the raw, unpolished musical traditions that first shaped his artistic sensibilities. The recording stands as proof that underneath the increasingly polished exterior of his public image, Elvis retained a genuine connection to the blues that could emerge when circumstances allowed. Number 2. Blue Moon of Kentucky. Original by Bill Monroe. While many fans know Elvis's Blue Moon of Kentucky from his legendary Sun Record sessions, few recognize the revolutionary nature of this cover choice. Bill Monroe's original was a waltz-time, bluegrass standard, performed with traditional restraint and precision. Elvis's radical reinvention, recorded in July 1954, transformed the song into a rockabilly revelation that helped define his early sound. This Juye cover became the B-side to his first single, That's All Right, establishing the template for how Elvis would blend country traditions with R&B energy throughout his career. What makes this cover particularly fascinating is how it demonstrates the creative process that birthed rockabilly. Producer Sam Phillips recalled that during the session, Elvis, guitarist Scotty Moore, and bassist Bill Black were taking a break when Elvis began fooling around with the song at a substantially faster tempo and with a completely different feel. Phillips, immediately recognizing the potential, instructed them to develop this radical reinterpretation. The resulting recording maintains the country lyrics while completely reimagining the musical approach, adding a driving beat and rhythmic intensity that transformed Monroe's waltz into something entirely new. Monroe himself initially expressed displeasure at the liberties taken with his composition, though he later reconciled with the cover after it brought him increased royalties and exposure. Music historian Colin Escott notes that this recording represents a pivotal moment in American musical history, the sound of traditional boundaries dissolving as country, blues, and R&B merged into what would become rock and roll. While That's All Right often receives more attention as Elvis's breakthrough recording, this juicy cover of Blue Moon of Kentucky equally demonstrates the cultural synthesis that made Elvis such a revolutionary figure in American music. Number 1. Trouble, original by Leiber and Stoller. Did you know that one of Elvis's most defining songs wasn't written for him at all? Trouble, the menacing blues number that perfectly captured Elvis's dangerous appeal, was originally composed by legendary songwriting team Leiber and Stoller for songstress Lisa Kirk's sophisticated nightclub act in 1957. Elvis's definitive version, recorded for the 1958 film King Creole, transformed the material so completely that few realize it wasn't created specifically for him. This oft-overlooked cover demonstrates Elvis's remarkable ability to inhabit material so thoroughly that he makes it inseparable from his own persona. What makes this cover particularly fascinating is how Elvis brings authentic menace to lines that were originally written with a wink of theatrical irony. Director Michael Curtiz, a Hollywood veteran who had directed Casablanca, pushed Elvis to find the genuine emotional core of the character, resulting in a performance that transcends the typical constraints of movie musical numbers. Elvis approaches the material with smoldering intensity, his voice moving from a whisper to a snarl as the song progresses. The arrangement strips away the cabaret elements of the original, replacing them with raw blues instrumentation that enhances the threatening undertone of lyrics like, "I'm evil, so don't you mess around with me." Session musicians recalled that Elvis seemed particularly invested in this performance, perhaps recognizing how perfectly it aligned with his rebellious public image during this period. Music journalist Greil Marcus later pointed to this recording as evidence of Elvis's often underappreciated skills as an actor and interpreter, noting how completely he transforms what was essentially a novelty number into a statement of genuine artistic purpose. While casual fans might assume this signature song was created specifically for Elvis, understanding its origins reveals his remarkable gift for finding material that, regardless of its source, could be completely transformed through the sheer force of his artistic personality. Did Elvis leave behind more musical treasures we haven't fully appreciated? How many other covers are still waiting for their moment in the spotlight?